the maid who inherited a €1 billion estate, but no one knew she was the owner. In the heart of Vienna, where the Danube gently carves through the city's soul and the grand facades of Baroque palaces whisper tales of faded glory, a young woman named Clara Bauer scrubbed the marble floors of the infamous Hallenberg estate. To any outsider, she was just a maid, modest, quiet, diligent. But behind her downcast eyes and worn aprons, Clara held a secret that could rattle the foundations of Austrian high society. Clara had come to Hallenberg 4 years ago, fresh from an orphanage in Linz, barely 18 and armed only with a reference letter from a nun. She had knocked on the mansion's iron gates during a rainstorm. She had been taken in by the housekeeper, Frau Gertrude, and quickly assigned to the lowest-ranking duties, latrine washing, firewood hauling, and the endless polishing of chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. The master of the house, Baron Friedrich von Hallenberg, was already old and frail then, a solitary figure in a crumbling empire of books, paintings, and centuries-old wealth. He had long outlived his family. His wife had passed during childbirth, and his only son had died in a skiing accident in Zermatt. The Baron had no known heirs, only distant cousins squabbling over his holdings like vultures circling a carcass. But Clara, with her quiet devotion, earned the Baron's attention. It started with books. Late one evening, she was dusting the library when she paused to trace a spine titled Die Verwandlung. The Baron, sitting in the corner with a blanket over his knees, observed her with interest. "You've read Kafka?" he asked, his voice dry like autumn leaves. Clara jumped. "Not really, sir. But I know of him." "Read it," he said, handing her the book. "And come back tomorrow. Tell me what you think." It became a ritual. Every week, Clara read something new, Goethe, Mann, Rilke, and discussed it with the Baron over tea. She would serve him in silence, then sit across from him with the spine still warm from her fingers. They talked about Austria's lost grandeur, the emptiness of aristocracy, and the strange peace found in solitude. Sometimes he'd quiz her. Sometimes he just watched her think. None of the other staff knew about the books. To them, Clara was still just the girl with the mop and bucket, the one who preferred shadows to gossip. Then came the night of the fall. Baron Friedrich had insisted on walking in the snow-covered gardens, a foolish endeavor, considering his age. Clara, concerned, followed from a distance. She saw him slip near the rose pergola and raced forward. His head had hit the icy stone. In the hospital, he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he awoke, he requested one visitor, Clara. No relatives, no lawyers, just Clara. "You remind me of who I once was," he whispered to her, fingers cold and thin. "You see this house, these lands? They mean nothing to me anymore. But perhaps they could mean something to you." Clara's eyes widened. "Sir, I'm just your maid. You are the only person who ever truly saw me." 3 days later, Baron Friedrich von Hallenberg died in his sleep. The will, revised by the Baron during his hospital stay, was sealed and stored at a private notary's office. In it, he bequeathed the entire Hallenberg estate, valued at over €1 billion, including paintings by Klimt and Schiele, vineyards in Wachau, and a summer house in Venice, to one Clara Bauer. But the revelation was not made public. On her way back from the notary's office, stunned by the terms and overcome with anxiety, Clara made a decision. She wouldn't tell a soul. She would remain the maid. 4 months, she continued working as if nothing had changed. She polished floors she now owned, answered to the same head housekeeper, and wore the same gray uniform. The notary, bound by confidentiality laws, respected her decision. The staff, still unaware, occasionally gossiped about the Baron's unknown heir, never once suspecting that she mopped the marble just down the hallway. The estate's daily operations were overseen by an external management company, so the staff never had reason to engage with the new legal owner. Clara allowed them to believe the heir was some foreign relative. She signed decisions through her lawyer under a pseudonym. She made anonymous donations to the local orphanage she had once lived in. She even quietly paid for a scholarship fund in the Baron's name. It was a lonely secret until Lucas arrived. He was 6, a war orphan from eastern Ukraine, sent to Austria under a refugee program. Clara met him during one of her silent visits to the shelter. He had the same hollow stare she once wore. He didn't speak much, didn't smile. He reminded Clara of herself, lost in a world that made decisions without asking permission. She began visiting more frequently, bringing him books, toys. Finally, she brought him to the Hallenberg estate, saying she was getting permission from the new owner to let him stay for a few weeks. The staff, unaware of her identity, grumbled but complied. She set up a room for him in the old nursery wing, cleaned it herself, stocked it with bedtime stories and warm woolen pajamas. And Lucas bloomed. He began to smile, then laugh. He called Clara Mama once in the kitchen. The housekeeper, Gertrude, overheard and reprimanded her in front of everyone. "How dare you act like this estate is yours?" Gertrude had snapped. "Just because the new owner is generous doesn't mean you can play housemaid mother." Clara said nothing. She cleaned up in silence, heart pounding. But one of the junior maids, Marie, had seen Clara coming out of the library late one evening, where Clara had accidentally dropped the key to the Baron's private safe. Curious, Marie peeked into the room and found documents, legal papers, titles, signatures, all naming Clara Bauer as the new owner of Hallenberg. Within hours, the news rippled through the estate like wildfire. They confronted her in the grand hall, demanding explanations. Clara stood near the staircase, holding Lucas's hand. "Yes," she said softly. "I inherited the estate. The Baron left it to me. I chose not to change anything because I needed time to understand what it meant. I didn't want anyone to treat me differently." Silence fell. Even Gertrude, red-faced and trembling, said nothing. Lucas squeezed her hand. "I just wanted to help others like me," Clara said. "Like him." That evening, she moved out of the servant quarters and into the Baron's former room, not out of arrogance, but necessity. Lawyers arrived the next day. Renovations were ordered. Wages were raised. A trust was set up in Lucas's name. Over time, Clara transformed the estate, not into a palace, but into a haven. She opened a library for orphans. She turned the old ballroom into a learning center. She hosted classical concerts and allowed the public to wander the rose pergola where the Baron had once fallen. Vienna's elite were stunned. Newspapers splashed her face across front pages, from scrubbing floors to owning palaces, the Maid heiress of Hallenberg. They invited her to galas, to interviews, to boards. She declined most of them. She still rose at dawn, still made her own tea, still wore her gray uniform sometimes, though the embroidery now read Clara Bauer, patron of Hallenberg House. Years later, Lucas would stand on the same balcony where the Baron once took his morning sun and tell visitors, "She saved me with books. She saved this house with silence. And she saved herself with kindness." And though the city of Vienna would never stop marveling at the maid who quietly inherited a billion-euro estate, Clara Bauer remained what she had always been at heart, not a baroness or business magnate, but a steward of second chances.